Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Civic Signal with Sam and Brandon. Today, we're going to be discussing No Need to Watch: How the Effects of Partisan Media Can Spread via Interpersonal Discussions by Dr. James N. Druckman, Dr. Matthew S. Lewandowski, and Dr. Audrey McLean.
So this paper talks about partisan media. And what partisan media is news outlets or media that is heavily biased towards one side. And really what they're trying to figure out here is what is the effect of watching partisan media on the consumer.
The authors discuss how a lot of the research that's been done in this area so far, and kind of the general consensus among Americans, is it's not really a big deal if you watch partisan media. I mean, it's something that pretty much everybody is exposed to, at least sometimes. And so the authors really want to ask the question, how much is this really changing your opinions on policy issues? And not just how much is watching the media affecting your opinions, but then how much is discussing what you watched or what you heard affecting your opinions on these issues.
So the authors introduced the idea of a two-step communication flow. And the two-step communication flow is basically when partisan media viewers pass the influence of the media onto people who didn't watch it. And the authors are curious if this two-step media flow has a significant influence on the general effect of partisan media.
And so their theory is if I go watch some partisan media, that's going to affect my thought on it. But then I can go talk to somebody else about it and affect their view on it based on my viewership of the partisan media. And so essentially, you can't just look at the effect of partisan media on just the direct live viewers. There's a much larger lingering effect as people go discuss. The authors ask a few questions about this two-step communication flow that Brandon was talking about. First, they're looking at how much does partisan media directly impact the viewer's opinion? Secondly, their question is how much can that effect be passed on through discussion to people who did not view the partisan media? And third, they want to look at how much these discussions are going to then impact the opinions of the people who watched the media in the first place.
So the authors, they run an experiment on 575 subjects between November 2013 and November 2014. And what's important to note is that they recruited the participants from a lot of local community, civic, religious, and hobby groups. And so this isn't a random or a representative sample, but it is relatively diverse. And so there is some important things we can learn from it.
So once they had these subjects, they split them up into a bunch of different groups. And essentially, this is just showing the different groups. So group zero is the control group. They weren't shown any media. They didn't participate in any discussions. And then we had groups who only participated in discussions without exposure to partisan media, individuals who participated in group discussions after being exposed to partisan media, and those who did not participate in discussions after viewing partisan media.
So the partisan media that the subjects were exposed to were 12-minute segments from either Fox News or MSNBC about the Keystone XL pipeline. And this was a really big political issue in the past. Basically, what the Republicans wanted to do was to build a pipeline from Alberta, Canada, all the way to the Gulf Coast of the United States. And the Democrats were against the idea because they were worried about the environmental concerns as well as encroaching on indigenous people's land along the way. And so this is a really good subject to expose the subjects to because it represents a really distinct partisan split among the parties. So some of the respondents got the partisan media exposure and some of them didn't. And then the subjects either participated in a group discussion with people of their same party or people of their opposite party, or they participated in no group discussion.
So, in order to test how strongly people move their opinion to match the partisan media, they made a 7-point scale, with one being strongly disagree, seven being strongly agree. And normally we would see a scale like this where one is disagree with the policy, seven is strongly agree with the policy, in this case, the pipeline. But what they did was they actually flipped it for the Republicans and the Democrats with the partisan media exposure, so that one is strongly disagree with the position being presented by the partisan media, and seven strongly agree with that position. So for the Democrats and the partisan media, that seven represents strongly agree that there should not be the pipeline, and seven for the Republicans with the Republican media would be strongly agree that there should be the pipeline. So this way, we're not testing the effect on how much it makes you like or dislike this specific policy, but rather how much it moves your opinion into alignment with the opinion presented.
So the authors have a whole bunch of hypotheses, and really what it sums up to is this list of how the different treatment groups are going to be polarized. So the people that they think will polarize the most are the people who watched the partisan media and participated in a discussion with people of the same party. And the reason why they think that this is going to make you polarize the most is that the discussion with the same party is going to exert some pressure to conform with people who agree with you. And so you're going to move even farther along the scale to align with the most polarized position.
Right. And then their second was those who only have the group discussion in about a tie with the people who only view the partisan media. So they don't have the double effect, but they have the conforming effect of one of those. And then after that, having exposure to partisan media, but then discussing it with people who share your opinion and do not share your opinion. And then having a discussion only with a mixed group of both co-partisans and out-partisans. And then the weakest effect would be the control group, which is just really who they're comparing the results to.
So the authors present the results in this figure. So here on the x-axis, you have the attitude on that 7-point scale on average of the people in each of the groups. And here on the vertical axis, you have each of the groups.
So on the assigned condition labels, HO represents homogeneous, just meaning only individuals within your partisan group, and HE stands for heterogeneous, which means that it's a diverse group of political opinions in that group.
And so to start out, the people in the control group who received no media and had no discussion had an opinion of about 4.15 on average.
So the strongest effect here is the homogeneous discussion and exposure to partisan media. That's not surprising. That's fitting right with their theory. But shortly behind it, in a close second place, not in keeping with their original thoughts, is the homogeneous discussion only, no partisan viewership. So what Brandon was saying earlier, this pressure to conform within the group discussions here seems to be a key variable in what is moving people more to the extreme opinions.
So the third strongest effect were the people who were exposed only to the partisan media and had no discussion. And their opinion on average was about a 5. And if you remember back to the hypotheses, the authors hypothesized that the people who were only exposed to the media and the people who had the homogeneous discussion only would be about the same. But as you can see here, there's about a 1-point difference on a 7-point scale between these two groups, meaning that the homogeneous discussion had a much larger effect than just watching the partisan media.
After the partisan media exposure group only, the next strongest effect was the heterogeneous discussion and partisan exposure, followed very closely by heterogeneous discussion only. And so what we see here is that having a group discussion with both people who agree with you and don't agree with you does have some pressure for you to move a little bit more closely aligned to your party's position. It's certainly not as strong as having a group discussion only with those who agree with the partisan media and the partisan stance, but there is an effect there that is stronger than the control.
So to summarize what was on that graph and compare it back to the hypotheses, the authors were correct in hypothesizing that the people who watched the media and participated in the in-group discussion would have the strongest effect. There on the 7-point scale, on average, people in this group polarized 1.85 more points than the control group.
Now, differing from their hypothesis that both the in-group discussion only and the partisan media exposure only would have a similar effect, is we see a strong effect with the in-group discussion only, the homogeneous group discussion, but we see a much weaker effect with simply viewing the partisan media on your own and not discussing it with anyone. So we see here that groups 1 and 2 have a very similar effect. It's definitely stronger for those who saw the media and had the discussion. But the key component here seems to be the discussion. Those who viewed the partisan media only had a smaller effect, and then they were correct in the order from there out, that it would be viewing the media with an out-group discussion, the heterogeneous discussion, only having the heterogeneous discussion, and then compared to the control with the smallest effect. So, Brandon, one of the things that you mentioned initially, and I talked about a little bit when we looked at those results, is this pressure to conform, which is something that the authors brought up specifically when they were discussing the results. That it seems like in the media viewing, and in particular in discussing with your homogenous in partisan group, that people are moving their opinion because they feel like they should have a certain opinion. What do you think is going on there?
That's a really good question. I think that the pressure to conform with your partisan group is a really strong force in our country right now. In our previous videos, we talked about how people receive cues from their party leaders, and they take these cues in real strong consideration for what their opinions are going to be. And then in another video, we talked about how partisan identity behaves really similar to social identities like race or gender in our country right now. And I think that all of these things are relevant to your question, where people are going to talk to people of their same party, and they're going to receive signals for what loyal members of that party should believe. And because this is such a strong social identity in our society, there's a lot of pressure for them to adopt that as their own opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Again, going back to some of our other videos as we analyze this research, it really comes down to, so what should I do about this? What should I be concerned about? How does this affect me? To start off that discussion, I think that part of this is there's a responsibility for each of us to understand where our opinions are coming from. Because every single person holds opinions very strongly, some opinions fairly weakly. But if we're going to take action on an opinion, especially when it comes to voting or being involved in politics, then we want to make sure that that's an opinion that we actually hold and we're not just following a crowd with it. And this paper gives us a very useful insight into figuring out, okay, a lot of times it seems like people hold opinions that are just coming from their group. This isn't 100% bad, always terrible. It's okay to believe things that the political party you vote for believes in. That's a good thing. That shows that there's a reason that you are voting for that group, that you identify with that group. But it's also good and important to have nuance. And you don't have to feel like you shouldn't feel like you have to align 100% with a political candidate or with a group that is part of your same partisan group on every single issue, because there should be discussion even within political parties and within partisan groups so that we can ultimately achieve the things that we think are the best. And so that's kind of my takeaway from this, is that there's too much conformity that can happen, and that there are people who are conforming too much, and we are allowing that to happen sometimes to an effect that is stronger than it should be. And so it's totally fine, and as you're forming your opinion, to seek the opinions of those that you trust and to see what leaders who you trust on other issues think about things. But ultimately, this should be a personal decision. And ultimately, you should be not only seeking out information from one source and discussing it with one group who agrees with you on most things, that you should seek out informative opinions, and you should seek out information from multiple reputable sources. And then if you want to discuss it with multiple people who are part of your same political party, people who are not. This way, you're going to have a very well-grounded opinion. And if that still ends up with you agreeing with your political party, that's totally fine. That's not a bad thing.
I completely agree that it's really important that you're discussing things with diverse groups, in addition to more homogenous groups. The authors' results show that even though having discussions with diverse groups still polarized people, the polarization was much more moderate than when it was just same group discussions. And they suggested in their findings that even though at first glance it looks like the media exposure had a very limited effect, and that it was the discussions and the arguments that polarized the people the most, all of these discussions and arguments that people had were framed and influenced by the media that some of the respondents watched. And I know that it can be really difficult to consume a very diverse amount of partisan media. However, what these results suggest is that you can kind of get the points from the diverse media by having conversations with diverse people, because the two-step communication flow effectively moves these arguments and points through discussions between people.
Yeah, I think also in the day and age of social media, there's an interesting point to this because most of the time that we're discussing and learning about politics, it's not sitting down for an hour and watching Fox News or MSNBC nonstop and then going and sitting down with a group of people and discussing this in person for another hour. Most of this is we're catching small bits of partisan media as it comes across our feed or as we read the news for 5 minutes in the morning. And then most of the discussion happens as we read an Instagram story or we see a TikTok or we see a Facebook post from somebody who we agree with or don't agree with. Maybe we look in the comments briefly. And so I don't know, we can't extrapolate these exact numbers from their experiment onto these exact situations in social media. But I think that this speaks to how we can design our algorithms and the way that we interact with our devices and with social media to not hyper polarize our opinions unnecessarily. If you have friends or family members who don't always have the same political opinion as you, don't let it bother you and sit there and fester over it and, ruminate on it all the time. But you can have a civil discussion or you can read through some of those things on issues that you're interested in. Social media can be a powerful tool to not only see partisan media from different angles and see informative media that is not strongly biased, but also to have small discussions in short form repeatedly throughout your day or throughout your week in a way that you don't have the opportunity to often in real life. And so while social media can be a dangerous thing with echo chambers and with only seeing partisan media of your side and only participating in these homogenous discussions, social media, you can design it, you can follow multiple different kinds of people, multiple kinds of news outlets, and you can sort of curate this social media algorithm and also your own news feed to give you good information from multiple angles that you can engage with.
And I think it's really important to be fully aware of where the ideas are coming from as they shape your opinions. Because you're going to see a lot of clips from partisan media, and because a lot of the discussion that you're going to have with other people is framed by the points made on partisan media, I think there's a really big responsibility on the individual to do their own research, to read, and like you said, to model their algorithm responsibly, so that you know that the ideas that are influencing your opinion formation are coming from diverse sources and are very reliable.
And so what's interesting about that is you're not only being affected by the partisan media that you seek out and watch. It's not just who you follow on social media. It's not just the news outlets that you listen to or read. You are getting the partisan media opinions of the individuals that you interact with, that you have conversations with, and those are shaping your opinions. And so you need to be just as careful about the interpersonal discussions that you have as you do the media that you engage with. And again, that's not to say that you just should never talk to people who you agree with about issues. You shouldn't talk to people who view partisan media. But it is to say that you should be aware that when somebody has a very polarizing opinion, that this is often coming from viewership of partisan media or their discussions with people who are largely co-partisan.
Thank you guys so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed our discussion today as much as we enjoyed having it. We'd love to hear what you have to say in the comment section below, and make sure you leave a like and hit subscribe so you don't miss our future videos. I think this pressure to conform with your group is a really real thing. It's a very real thing.
It's really, really real.